and welcome to Round Robin. I'm your host, Robin McCormick, with the City of Hampton's Marketing and Communications Department. And today we're going to talk about economic development, attracting jobs and high-quality housing to our area. And I have with me Mike Yaskowsky. Did I say that right?
You did.
Everyone knows him as Yaz, and that's probably what I will continue to call you from here on out. Yaz, you are the acting Economic Development Director as of really just a few weeks ago.
That's correct. As of July 1st, the city manager appointed me interim director.
Because Jimmy Eason retired.
That's correct.
Stuck with us for quite a long time, I might add,
yes,
but finally decided it was time to go into private life.
Yes.
And you've been with the department, though, for a number of years.
Yeah, I started with the city as a WAE.
Okay, explain what that means, because I don't think, no one in the real world uses that term. It's a government term.
A WAE is when actually employed, and basically it means you get a paycheck and nothing more. You don't get benefits, and you're not permanent.
And you usually don't have fixed hours. It may be
Correct.
that we need you, and so you work a bunch of hours this week, and then we don't need you.
Correct. And so I started in '96 with the department, the Retail Development Department, which got merged later on with the Economic Development Department. I did
so
that.
Were you fresh out of college then? I know I'm interrupting.
Pretty much.
Okay.
I did a couple stints with other retailers, national retailers, and just decided that I wanted something a little bit more stable and better hours. And so I took a job as a retail analyst with the Retail Development Department in '96. And then a couple years later, our office was next door to the Economic Development Department. There was an opportunity there, and I applied and got that. So I've been in the economic development world in that department since 1998.
And before, assuming the control of the whole department, your focus was, you guys are organized by clusters or industry groups.
That's correct.
And you had sort of the major employers, explain to me exactly.
Sure, yeah. So we have 4 or 5 major clusters, and I had Homeland Defense and Aerospace, obviously 2 very important large strategic clusters in Hampton.
Right.
But throughout the years, I cut my teeth on manufacturing in Copeland. I've helped with some of the master plans in Hampton Road Center. And so when you've been in the office 15, 16 years, you kind of have done everything, know a little bit about everything, and you kind of become almost a historian in the department. So a well-rounded experience almost in all aspects of business in Hampton.
Now, tell people a little bit about what the department does, because a lot of times what you do is very, very behind the scenes.
Sure.
And people don't necessarily see it. And
Sure.
to be honest, the recession over the past few years has meant that you're not in the news as much, that like all localities, we have not been expanding businesses and attracting, tons and tons of new jobs.
Sure. Well, in the Office of Economic Development, and pretty much every locality has it, either in the city or out west, some places put it under their chambers of commerce. But in economic development, you're pretty much doing 3 or 4 things, and some will refer to it as the 3 or 4-legged stool. Business attraction, working with your existing businesses, retention and expansion, creating new business startups, entrepreneurship, and then the 4th one is workforce development. So our office is charged with all of those activities for the city of Hampton. Now, when it comes to the business recruitment side, we utilize a regional group called the Hampton Roads Economic Development Alliance to go out and really recruit those businesses for us. Economic development is a very it's a team sport, it's very competitive, and that's really what they're geared to do. So we work alongside of them for the business recruitment aspect. And we've pretty much put our focuses onto existing businesses and helping those expand and sustain themselves and grow. Studies have shown that 80% of new job creation comes from your existing businesses. So it's very important for us, from the City of Hampton's perspective, to take care and nurture our existing businesses. And hopefully, by the way, once you do that, that's a platform and a foundation for other businesses to come in, because they want to be part of this responsive, nurturing business environment. And then the third aspect that you have is the startup. So we're doing things, we have incubators in the city of Hampton, and we're trying to foster that innovative, creative startup atmosphere in the city of Hampton. The next Microsoft, the next Google, whatever could be in our backyard, and we want to make sure we obviously support them, grow them, and that they stay in Hampton. And then lastly, the workforce development component of it is that companies now are really putting the emphasis on their workforce. their workforce will make them successful. And whereas 20, 30, 40 years ago, the workers went to where the companies are, we're now finding that the companies will go to where the workforce is. So it's very important for us to develop our workforce, to nurture it. It starts from early childhood development up through the school systems, undergraduate and graduate programs. So it's very important that we, as much as we can, support and help workforce development in the area.
And so obviously you're not out there training the workforce. You work with partners
Absolutely.
to create this, but it is important that you, for any business, whether they're expanding or locating here, that they be able to hire the right people and that people are trained and ready to work.
Absolutely. And as I mentioned, economic development is a team sport, and we rely heavily on what we call our allies and partners. So whether it's the Peninsula Workforce Development Center tied to Thomas Nelson Community College here in Hampton, or if it's our regional partners, or if it's our state partners, they each have a component of workforce development. And to your point, we don't do that, but it's important if the companies come and talk to us, we're going to be talking to them about workforce development, and in the sense that we're a broker of information or a facilitator. So we can take company A and put them in contact with this ally or partner that can do that, whether it's
or
the
who
VEC.
may develop even a specialized kind of training program
Absolutely.
for that,
yes.
that type of skill.
For the right skill set and company, there are organizations out there that can customize that and actually even go on site and train your workers, knowing that you can't bring your workers to an off-site location. So there are opportunities there, and we encourage any company who's got a workforce or workforce development need to either reach out to those partners or to call our offices directly.
So yes, obviously workforce is a key part of it, but what are some of the other factors that a company looks for in Hampton? What does Hampton have to offer a company who might want to locate here or might want to expand here?
Sure. Well, for the right companies, we have, as I mentioned, primary clusters, being Homeland Defense, aerospace, modeling and simulation, medical. And so what you get from that is you get a whole host of other companies and support kind of supply chain. So in some ways it's good for companies to locate here in those industries where they can reach out and work with other companies. If they are in the aerospace or homeland defense industry, we obviously have NASA Langley and Langley Air Force Base here. So you have decision makers, you have immediate customers here. As I mentioned, we have a strong workforce, we have a strong quality of life here. We have a solid transportation system, even though we have traffic like every community.
Within Hampton, not so
right.
bad.
You can get around Hampton very easily.
Right.
It's just going
easy.
outside.
It's very compact too. It's not like, Newport News, you can get stuck big time.
Absolutely.
Hampton's little and compact, and it works pretty well most of the time. But the region is a little more problematic.
We're the most northern non-unionized state, which is good for business. We have low income taxes. We have moderate, overall taxes. We like to promote ourselves as business friendly. So from our office, from the city standpoint, we're going out, we're meeting with our businesses one-on-one, we're developing that relationships, we're getting to know them, know their needs, know their opportunities. Some of our processes that we have in place, permits, zoning, and everything are very business friendly. When a business makes a decision that they want to go forward with something, time is money, and they need to get to that endpoint as quickly as possible. And so we have those processes in place. And then on a broader scale, from an employee standpoint, if that employee wants to work here and live here, you got to have strong schools, you've got to have safe neighborhoods, you got to have clean neighborhoods, you got to fill the potholes, you got to have entertainment for them, you have to have shopping and retail, you have to have restaurants. And so we're really looking at doing all of those things to embrace that total sense of place, if you will, for both the business and their employees.
And you also have to have, I know you and I talked briefly, housing that is more expensive to some extent. I mean, you're not going to have your CEO come in and live in, a neighborhood where the home values are $100,000. And those things all contribute to, business and real estate taxes, which then support the schools and the filling of potholes. And it gets, it's a big circle, and it's hard, like the stool, you can't just pull one piece out and look at that
Absolutely, and so we work with the other city agencies, whether it's the schools or the housing authority and everything, to ensure that we do. So if we bring that company to Hampton, their CEO can look at numerous different places to buy a house, whether it's on the water or at Peninsula Town Center and getting that urban feel, or wherever it may be, as well as their middle managers. Having that good sense of housing from the CEO level down to middle management, if you will, but having a broad sense of housing options across the spectrum is very important. And as you know, Hampton is 400 plus years, and we have our fair share of low-income houses as well as older houses. And so the city is really looking at that to, where can we improve, where can we redevelop, how can we help some homeowners, renovate their houses and everything.
Bring those neighborhoods to a more vital.
And the ones where there's blight, you have to make the tough decisions, but maybe those blighted homes have exceeded their usefulness. And so how can we as a community then redevelop certain areas?
One of the things that I think is hard for the public to understand, and that I didn't truly understand, is how long-term your office works. I mean, if you find a neighborhood maybe that does need to be redeveloped or begin buying up parcels, I mean, it takes a lot in a city as built out as Hampton to accumulate enough land that a developer might be willing to come in and put in, a little subdivision. Mm-hmm. What's your timetable? I mean, how do you think about those kinds of things?
Well, I mean, it's really it's a comprehensive kind of strategy, and with limited resources, you really have to prioritize it. And so, working with the other departments and city council and the city manager's office, it just really kind of comes down to where the priorities are and how they fit with the master plans. As you know, the city has master plans that says, okay, these core areas are needed, or here's an area for redevelopment. And then you go in and you work with either individual property owners or developers or business owners, and you see if you can come to terms as far as, okay, this is a strategic project. So, but the time it takes to have the conversations, kind of to do the deals, if there's any environmental studies that need to be done, if there's any demolitions that need to be done, and then putting it back on the market. I mean, it could be very long, year-long process.
Yeah, and I think people's attention, I mean, I know I have a very short attention span, and I'll own up to that right now, but it is hard to look, because you see, okay, here's the master plan, and boom, where's the results? Right. And it's not like that. For example, the Coliseum Central master plan, and I think that's a good one because we are, maybe halfway through getting where we need to be on that one. But it takes a while. It takes a very long time to see the results of that vision. Absolutely.
And the city is kind of, I associate it as kind of priming the pump. I mean, we will come in and we can address blight, or we can try to assemble properties and everything. But then at the point you want to transition and convey and sell it to the private sector, who knows where the opportunities are and can develop it and put it back on the tax rolls and everything. So we're kind of involved on the front end. But if the market isn't there, if the business opportunity isn't there, or we talk about housing, the worst housing market we've probably been in for 40 years.
Oh my gosh.
So if we do what we need to do on the front end to assemble the properties or blight abatement or package it together for further and future redevelopment, unfortunately the market may be not ready at that time, and you may have to wait for the market to come around. That may take 2, 3, 5 years, unfortunately, to present that opportunity.
Well, Buckrow's an example, and they've been in front of City Council and the Planning Commission recently, and that's why I'm pulling it out. But the residents of Buckrow want more restaurants. They truly believe that they're ready for that, and the studies in the master plan showed there's not enough concentration yet. There's not enough people with enough disposable income who will eat out to support those restaurants. So that's why the land was assembled, and there's the Bayfront District and trying to build more housing, because then that pulls in what those residents want, which is a little bit of retail, a little bit of restaurants, and changing that quality of life for that neighborhood. But it's very long and frustrating.
It is.
We want results now. Thank you.
Right.
And we would do that for me.
And we would love to give you results right now, but two things that the citizens need to remember too, especially when we're in the business world, is with retail, location, 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 and retail follows rooftops. And so if you have
that's a great slogan. I haven't heard that.
Yes,
okay.
ma'am. If you don't have the ideal location, and you don't have, as you mentioned it, if you don't have the rooftops or the discretionary income, it comes down to a business case decision. I mean, the restaurateurs and the retailers, I mean, I hate to say it, but their first primary objective is to make money. And they make
They're
money.
not there to make residents happy.
Right. I think they would like
benefit.
to,
Yes.
but so when we talk about Buckrow and you look at that, and we work with retailers and restaurateurs, I mean, they will do ring studies and everything in a mile or a 3 mile or a 20 drive time commute, and they'll say, okay, we need X number of households, or we need Y number of citizens, and we need Z number of discretionary income, because based on their formulas, based on their proven models, these are the parameters that they need to be successful. And so, a Cheesecake Factory wouldn't go in, Buckrow Shopping Center because of the drive times or the commute patterns
today,
or the demographics.
It's not a good fit.
But so back to that holistic cycle approach, while we are focused on bringing businesses and everything, that residential component is important to it. And that's why you see a residential component at Peninsula Town Center. Some of the studies have talked about the need for residents downtown, and now we see the residents in Buckrow. But it takes time. It does take time.
What about incentives? I think people read a lot about incentives and say, why do we have to pay, or why do we have to compromise on the sales price for land in order to get a business to locate here, or a developer to redevelop that area?
Sure. Well, as a community, you can do everything you need to do on the front end to make yourself a business attractive community and nurturing businesses like we talked about before. But even in addition to that, if we're competing against other regions or other states, sometimes it does take incentives to kind of seal the deal or do the deal, or if there is a gap or deficiency, say in the land or the soils or whatnot, sometimes we as an office and as a city have to say, okay, in a negotiation, this is what we're willing to do to help do the deal. But I will tell you, no amount of incentive will make a bad deal good. And in our office, we really look at and we vet the companies or the proposals that come forward. We take a look at, what jobs are they creating? What investments are they bringing? What new revenues are, to the city coffers? What strategic value does it have? Is it in a master plan area? Is it in a redevelopment area? Is it something that the citizens really want or need? Is it creating a lot of jobs for a certain demographic of our city? And so we factor in the financial and the non-financial, and then we put it into a model, and to the point that it makes sense and it's a good value for the city and its citizens, then we'll possibly put a incentive on the table. And they're not always financial incentives. They can be working with them to find that ideal location, or to work with them through the permit process, a workforce aspect, gearing them up with other allies and partners. So we try to do a lot of things on a non-financial basis as well.
Okay. And in terms of selling land, so maybe your department, or even a combination of city departments, because I know HRHA gets involved, some Hampton Redevelopment and Housing Authority, I promised I would not use acronyms, gets involved. But when you assemble parcels of land and then sell them for less than the assessed value or less than the appraised value, I think people wonder, why does the city do that? Why do we lose money on land deals?
Sure. Well, I mean, there could be numerous factors. One, we could have, after we assembled the land, certain things could then be realized about the land. It could have wetlands on it. It could have,
we find out a lot in Hampton.
Yes,
Let's
it could have
that
environmental
right
issues. The soils could be bad. It could be a triangle piece that, just looking at it, square footage, it's a good value, but when a developer or a builder comes in and says, well, I can only maximize half of it because of the awkwardness or the shape of it or whatnot, other hosts of things. So as a city, we have to then say, okay, with what you're proposing to do in the long term, is that beneficial for the city? Is it beneficial for that area? Is it beneficial for our strategic goals, our economic development efforts? So you have that aspect. And then that we also talked about is if in order to induce maybe a better deal or to increase the aesthetics of a piece of property, we'll once again get into that negotiation. But thinking long term, and I think that's where maybe citizens might miss it, is that you can see maybe what the cost basis for a piece of property was and what we're selling it for, but you've got to take into account any deficiencies as well as the strategic value of that property, the deal, as well as the revenue potential for it.
Exactly.
Right. And so you may break even after a couple years or 5 years, but if you're looking at it for 20, 30, 50 years, which a building or a development could be there, you really want to say, okay, we may take a little bit less on the front end, but look at all the value we're going to accrue over years and on the back end. And then look at the spin-off or the leveraging that can accrue from that. One development, one site could spur numerous other development around it. And now, to my earlier point, we primed the pump and the private sector now is going into it. So maybe we had to assemble that one key piece of property and that project, but then the private sector then sees the market and sees the demand, and they go in and then assemble the properties and do the deals themselves. So we may have taken a little bit of a loss on that one property, but then look at what it garnered on the bigger scale.
So using maybe Buckrow as an example, and that hasn't been done yet, but there is a piece of property that the city has bought, and the intention is to follow that master plan, to follow the bayfront and build some housing there. So if that were to sell, let's say, for less than what the city paid to assemble it, it might be that it's because we're not going to let people put up, condos. We're not going to let people put up apartments or whatever those housing is. They're going to have to meet certain restrictions.
Absolutely.
And so you have to incentivize that because there's not as much margin for the developer coming in potentially.
Right. And in that sense, I think you have to ask yourself, is the focus on just the dollars of what we paid versus what we're getting, or is it at the bigger picture of what's the value of the new housing development, or what
will the real estate taxes provide over the next 10 years? What does that concentration of people bring to Buckrow or to whatever neighborhood we're talking about?
Right. And if that is the beginning of a transformational area or project in Hampton, then me personally, I would say I'll take 10% or 20% less on the front end, knowing that we're going to change or transform a block or a neighborhood or possibly a whole area of Hampton. And then hopefully 10, 15, 20 years, those citizens will come back and say, you and I were brilliant for that decision.
They never remember it, but I will never forget one of the first things that I remember when I was coming to the city. I was in an economic development task force meeting, and they were talking about the sale of some property, and it was less than it was assessed for. And the lawyer who negotiates many of your sales, Vanessa Valdegiuli, looked up and said, I wish people understand we are not in this to make a profit.
Right.
We're in this to make a better city.
Absolutely.
We are in this to attract the kind of development we want.
Absolutely.
And for us to be in that driver's seat, you have to make some compromises, because a housing development can go up in a suburban area where there's nothing for very, very little cost. And in an urban area, you have to assemble those parcels, you have to demolish what's there, you have to rebuild some of that infrastructure. So it is more costly for someone to come in and build houses in Hampton. So how do we get them to do that?
Sure. And one of the things I tell people is economic development, it gets a little messy sometimes. It's not pretty, it's not black and white, and there's a whole host of issues and constraints and parameters and uncertainties that you deal with. And unfortunately, sometimes that doesn't get out and communicated well enough. But I would hope the citizens realize that we all live here, we work here, and we want the same things that they do. We want a better city. I mean, Hampton is great, and she deserves greatness. And that's what we're trying to do in Hampton.
That's great. So what is your plan? And I realize we've been stuck in a recession for a while, and I think you all are a little bit poised that when we start to see that uptick, maybe things are going to happen. What is one of the key things that you're looking at or thinking about now?
Sure. Well, obviously we're doing a lot of things now preparing for the future. So with the housing market and the real estate market, you kind of want to prep the battlefield for those opportunities. So we're looking at, our clusters and the growth areas and where the business trends may be going. Sensors, modeling and simulation. Aerospace is still promising.
With the National Institute for Aerospace.
Absolutely, and NASA Langley. Defense, we will always have defense. There will always be a defense industry. There's a lot of money to protect and maintain the safety of this country, and the uncertainties at the federal level will be seen, but there will always be defense. And so we will continue to support that. One of the areas that's growing at Langley Air Force Base is in what we call ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, the cyber wars, the UASs, the UAVs, the information gathering. And so we're working with our counterparts at Langley Air Force Base to maintain close contact with them, to understand what the needs of the military going forward may be. Same thing with NASA Langley, advanced materials, manufacturing, sensors. There's a growth area there.
And coincidentally, that is sort of where our available land is. It's
Absolutely.
The office park that you're marketing now is basically around that Langley cluster.
Absolutely. We refer to it as the Magruder Corridor, right off Magruder Boulevard. As I mentioned, we have Hampton Road Center South, Central, and then North, which is what we call our kind of last frontier. 250 acres of ready-to-go, developable acreage over the years. The industrial development
for Hampton,
It is, but it's the last large chunk of greenfield we have left, and so we want to make sure we develop it to its highest and best use. And over the last few years, the city and the IDA have been putting money into building out the infrastructure, building out the roads, putting in the water retention ponds, some of the landscaping, some of the streetscaping. And we're excited because the first phase of Commander Shepard Boulevard, the east-west expressway comes off of Magruder Boulevard, has now created another kind of main entrance into Hampton Road Center North. And just the last couple months, the demolition, the tree clearing has started for the second phase of Commander Shepard Boulevard, 4-lane expressway going from North Campus Parkway to Big Bethel at Saunders Road. That'll be about an 18-month road construction project, but once completed, essentially we'll have a major east-west corridor cutting right through our Hampton Road Center North office park, leading to the doorsteps of NASA Langley and Langley Air Force Base. So when you talk about the advantages we will have a high-tech office park right on the doorstep outside of NASA Langley and Langley Air Force Base. For those companies who are interested, they want to be near, you can't get much closer to them than there. And so we have available properties. We work with developers who would be more than happy to build new buildings for companies interested in locating in the park.
Well, that's pretty exciting, and you're just waiting, I assume, for everything to be ready and the right time, because economic development is, to some extent, probably a very slow and frustrating, hurry up and get ready and make the pitch, and then you wait a little while, and then you've got to come back. I mean, it takes a certain kind of person to be able to do that and maintain the enthusiasm. Salespeople, it is a sales job in a lot of ways.
It absolutely is. It's a sales job, and it's a relationship job. And when we talk about the time it takes time to start that relationship and maintain that relationship and develop that sense of trust and be able to tell the customer and the client and the business all the attributes and all the reasons why they should be here in Hampton. So it is a long process. It is exciting. The current economy is making things more challenging with the uncertainty, but we're doing the things that we think we need to do to prepare ourselves for it. And we never really wait for anything. We're always trying to be out there and be proactive. So if anybody is out there and interested in starting a business or expanding their business or building a building, we're ready and available to meet with them at any time.
That is great, and I think we focused on sort of big development today, but it is important that people understand that if they are a small business person and want to grow their business, or if there's someone who's thinking about that level of entrepreneurship, that you all have programs that people can get in touch with you, either calling you directly or through 311, putting you together.
Yep.
There are programs that offer loans or grants or just really some of the expertise or experience or troubleshooting that people might need in a new business environment.
Absolutely, we do have the programs that can go down to small companies and everything. We work with our allies and partners. While we don't have the resources internally to help you write a business plan, they are very talented, whether it's a small business development center, whether it's the chambers of commerce, whether it's other consultants, whether it's manufacturing programs at Thomas Nelson Community College. We can put you in touch with those.
You can bring those resources together.
Absolutely. VEC Workforce, we have relationships with all the local banks and going through the SBA programs and everything. And if the grants and the programs that we have make sense and are a fit, we're happy to sit down with you one-on-one and talk to you through that. We also, in our office, have the Department of Minority Programs. So working and focusing on the minorities in Hampton and trying to get those contracts, whether it's from the cities and others, into minorities.
That sounds great. Well, Yaz, I think I could talk to you all day, to be honest, is that it's a huge topic, and it is crucial to the future of Hampton. But probably we need to wrap up for today and just have you back some other time. Maybe
Absolutely.
You'll have some big announcements to make.
I'd be happy to. Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you, Yaz. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And thank you for watching Round Robin.